call the personnel meeting to order at 5:07 p.m. Roll call noted.
Yep.
Any comments or correspondence from anyone? Callie down there, anybody? Okay. No public appearances tonight. Reading and approval of minutes from 12/2/24.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Let's see, we have new business, discussion and presentation about DHS, is it 110?
Yep.
Okay. You wanna get us started on that, Victor?
Sure. So you all are going to have what we envision to be a number of meetings to discuss things in your EMS department. And, hey, Mike. By way of a little bit of history, the EMS service has been provided largely by volunteers within this community for a number of years. And if you go way back, that was on a largely unpaid basis, or what's described under federal law as a nominal stipend basis. In other words, the community substantially benefited from the goodwill of a number of very hardworking, dedicated individuals that stepped up to provide service for this company. For this community, Rick Henning, at the time that it was a combined fire and EMS service, I don't know how many people Rick had a chance to work with and save over the years, but Rick didn't get paid a whole lot of shekels to do that. The world changed. What once was upon a time a eligibility list requirement under state statute that sometimes would be 400 people deep for the city of Milwaukee to get 2 open slots on a department became eligibility list of maybe a few people and struggling to find anybody that could fill the slots. And that's not just for the city of Milwaukee, city of Racine, Kenosha, all the major communities across the state. In particular, in the wake of 2020, ran into some real staffing problems in that you had a generation of largely baby boomer nurses that decided they were going to exit the profession altogether, leaving ERs in particular a bit of a vacuum, and hospitals having a need for skilled providers. There aren't, I think, any ERs that you will walk into now and not find at least one paramedic working on the floor as a paid professional paramedic doing those skills right in the ER. When I did my paramedic rotation, every one of the hospitals that I was in had at least one there on staff doing their thing. So what was, when I first got here, a 24-hour stipend of $75 for a paramedic level provider under Rick Mueller quickly became almost a $90,000 a year career-based job for somebody. To add some insult to injury, in order to fix the problem, the state and federal government stepped in with some grant money. You can't mint new paramedics, right? There's a schooling process they have to go through, and then a training process on the other side of that they have to go through. So some communities around Wisconsin got what are known as SAFER grants, and those SAFER grants effectively displaced what would have been local taxpayer responsibility onto state and federal tax rolls. When that grant first came out, the deal was you got a 3-year funding cycle, and you had to either repay that money back to the state or federal government or fund it locally, right? And so given those parameters at the time, Chief Mueller and I looked at it and just said, look, we're not going to make a commitment to somebody to move out in the community without there being a firm commitment from the public as a whole to continue supporting that via a tax increase. And you were looking at roughly let's call it a 15% tax increase just to handle that one item. As a consequence, our department went through a number of challenges. First, Chief Mueller, if you got him one-on-one, he would tell you, and I didn't know this at the time, but he canceled a fully paid for European family vacation to stay here and provide coverage to the community. I didn't know that about the man, that he gave up what could have been a lifelong set of memories with his wife and kids and grandkids to stay here and provide service for the community. I didn't know that he gave up year-out planned trips to ride his bicycle down south with his college roommates so he could stay here and provide service to the community. As he ran into various problems Rick, true to form, would try to provide innovative solutions. And one of those was a provision under DHS 110. I've given you a copy. I'm going to ask you to read that on your own. We're just going to talk about some highlight sections that allows ambulance providers to do something called inter-facilities transports. This is kind of a novel concept within local government ambulance service in that you can't take an ambulance out of service to go do an inter-facilities run. You have to have a second ambulance available to go to an inter-facilities run once you're done reading this. There are rules and regulations on all these things. At the time under Mueller, we had effectively upstaffed to be able to provide with reasonable assurance, pretty close to 24/7, 365, 2 ambulances staffed with 2 professionals. DHS 11050 goes over staffing requirements. So in order to be a paramedic level provider, which you are licensed under the state, you are required to have at least 1 paramedic available all times for the population size that you are. And that really becomes a staffing challenge when you neck your staffing down to 3 full-time paramedics and 3 full-time EMTs, because what do you do when one's out sick? And these are policies that we're going to ask you all to look at implementing. So one of the choices that you're going to be asked to deliberate on is, do you want to mandate callbacks and overtime on those folks? So you say, hey, look, it might be your day off, but it's not really your day off because we have an ALS level call. You need to be here for it. That's one of the challenges that you've got. Right now, there's what I would describe as a bit of a loophole or leniency from DHS, and that they allow you to have an intercept agreement written and in place with another provider. You do have one of those in place with Norway, but there's times that Norway can't provide that service. And there's times that your provider is going to Norway. So Norway is not a fix-all for you all to obviate your responsibilities under DHS 110. I went to school to be a paramedic to provide that backup. I'm not going to be here after February, so I'm out of the mix. You have, at this point, I think maybe 2 marginally attached part-timers who do some fill-in work to backfill your full-time paramedics. So if that means we need to look at wage rates as a policy and recruitment as a policy to bring in part-timers, okay, fine. But that's something that you're charged with doing. Right now, all of this is falling on the shoulders of Dalton Brandt. Not sure why Dalton's not here. We talked about this. Dalton and many members of the department I thought would be here, but they're not here. So here we are having the conversation. One of the ways that we looked at stemming that was the village board saw fit to hire 9 full-time employees, a mix of paramedics and EMTs. And so you had, on a full-time basis, many more personnel that could be called back in or could pick up overtime hours in order to fill out that paramedic requirement. The way that we paid for that, if you look in your copy of the budget book, was a section that is called Inter-Facilities. It's Fund 216 right at the top. If you look back in the heydays of Mueller in doing this, you'll find that Mueller and company were successful in bringing in, let's call it, on this one, 2022 actual was $266,442. The year before that, my memory is we brought in a hair over 300,000. 2023, so this is now the year after Haithman came on board, that dropped to 91,741. First week on the job, I had a conversation with Chief Haithman about this, and he said that's not what I do. So you know that was his position on it. And if you look at 2024, you budgeted $42,000, you took in $12,687. So your revenue went from over $300,000 a year effectively down to 0. And the only reason you collected any of that over that time period was past payables that you then received sometime later on. So the money that was there to sustain 3 additional personnel to bring you up to a staffing force of 9 full-timers just isn't there. So the village board had conversations about this.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So where did this money come from originally? So I think you said 2024 we had 300,000 in the budget.
The village board, at the request of Chief Mueller, signed an operating agreement. I'm actually the party that executed it, specifying that Dr. Schultz would be the village's medical supervisor. And without knowledge of I or the village board, that was changed under Chief Hafman as well as the Emergency Medical Services Director, Mr. Kimber, to a different doctor outside in a different hospital system. And as a consequence of that, ProHealth, which was the major provider of those interfacilities revenues, stopped calling the village. We've attempted to reestablish that relationship. We have reached out on a number of occasions. We've paid physical visits. And
So ProHealth was funding this physician
ProHealth
for the
was
village?
paying a fee for every patient that we transported.
To them?
Yes.
Or from them.
To the village, yeah.
So if somebody came into the urgent care over here, and needed to get transported to the hospital,
So that one would be a 911 call. The example that would be, maybe a better example would be a patient is admitted over at the ProHealth facility in Mugwanago and needs to go to a different ProHealth facility or a different hospital altogether. We would pick that patient up and then transport that patient to wherever that endpoint destination was. That might have been to the main campus, that might have been a cancer run. So we'd pick them up from cancer treatment, take them to wherever it is they needed to go. Those runs just don't happen anymore. In the last 90 days, actually I'm gonna go back further and say in the last 6 months, I think we've done 7 runs total. We used to do between 40 and 60 a month to generate that volume of revenue.
Do we do anything with Aurora?
Aurora has a contract with a different provider. They do call us on occasion when they can't get that other provider to render timely service, and we do take those calls. Aurora made up a very small minority of our runs in the past. We've tried every way that all of the professionals on your payroll can think of to try to reinstitute a relationship with ProHealth, and ultimately what we got to a point on was just senior administration. ProHealth has not called us back, has not returned a contract, has not moved forward with anything on this. So you're at an inflection point. The way that we've chose to handle this administratively is we've frozen positions as people have left. So you're down a couple of those positions, but ultimately you're still too many in order to have a balanced budget. And
Too many?
yes, ma'am.
What do you mean by too many?
So if you go through your budget document and you look at how many you can support financially, you can barely afford to support 6. Right now, you're employing 8
Full-time?
full-time.
all paramedic level?
No, there's a mix there.
Does that include the Plan B people for the interfacility, or it's only the other
That's
regular people?
a mix. You got 6 plus 2, the
Okay.
Plan B or the inner facility.
Are
Okay.
they all full-time?
Yes, ma'am.
And do we need 8 or do we need 9? Or don't we know?
You need steady service. How you accomplish funding steady service is a question you get maybe 3 years to figure out. This isn't a decision I expect you to have today, but the probably the most pressing task for your next administrator coming in is going to be how to solve this problem. I chose to solve it by going back and getting a paramedic license and providing that service. I'm one of 2 that I know of in the country that have done that. You're going to need to figure out how to manage this, and that means supporting the folks you do have so they don't get burnt out and leave you. Your wages are substantially higher than comparable communities all around you, and that's by a wide margin. We did a wage study. Andrew Sparing pulled that together. We can bring that in and look at it. I'm not recommending that you adjust wage rates down because you've also got an image and reputational issue. I think that it's a small world in EMS and firefighting, and everybody talks, and you're not the drama star of the moment, but it wasn't that long ago that you were. So you're required to have a paramedic available. Using Norway as your primary backup it will eventually meet a point where Administrator Tom Kramer, because we've had this conversation, is going to need to charge you on a per call basis, just as they're doing Raymond. Right now, when Raymond picks up the telephone and says, "Hey, we need a paramedic intercept from Norway," Norway says, "That's great. Here's your bill for $1,500." You're doing 1,200 calls a year. something like that.
That require a paramedic? I mean, each
No,
one, right?
No. I mean,
No?
yeah, because you're a licensed service provider, that doesn't mean you have to have a paramedic on the call, but you have to have one available. And since you only have 2 in the station, let's just say functionally, yeah, you need a paramedic. Or you could degrade service, that's an option that you have. You could say, we're no longer gonna provide paramedic level service, we're gonna do like Rochester does, and we're gonna do like Michigan does, and we're gonna provide EMT level service. That's what the city of Burlington had available until about 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They were running an EMT level service. On just, again, being at that licensure level, I'm going to say 35% of your call volume could be graded as a paramedic level run. I'm going to say less than 10% of your calls are what, like, oh man, a paramedic is the difference between bad outcomes or not.
So, but I thought based on the size of our community, we had to have paramedics.
No, you do not have to have paramedic. You could have EMR level service, or so many communities your size up north have, meaning they're not even EMT level. I don't recommend that.
What's the R stand for?
Responder. So today's conversation really is meant to be a briefing on the topic, to give you some time to go out and read some materials on your own, so that we can reconvene and have some conversations on this overall.
So is this a new policy that, no? So I had some questions on it
Sure.
because I read through the entire thing. So who should I give those
I
to?
suppose that's me.
What's your email?
zjackson@waterfordwi.org. You may want to consider bringing in a consultant to talk to you about these things. You may want to hire an outside EMS director from somewhere to come and talk to you about these things. I just think this group, the 3 of you plus Becky, needs to get up to speed on how your service is being delivered. If you get a fire call right now, do you know who's coming to your fires? Because the answer is that guy right over there. And this summer we had a situation where you did a call for mutual aid from Michigan, where a guy fell down into a basement, and if it weren't for Rick Henning on our public works department showing up, the guy would probably still be in the basement. So your DPW is doing double duty also, many of them, in providing service support from an engine company standpoint, not necessarily just your medical care frontline providers. So this is something that the personnel committee and village board need to take responsibility over. Rachel Laidwood, licensed EMT in the state of Wisconsin. She's backup crew for ambulance number 2, alongside me. So when Zeke steps out, you don't have crew for ambulance number 2. You're down to 1 ambulance.
Because of personnel.
You don't have anybody else on your staff full time that is either licensed at the EMT level or licensed at the paramedic level.
So does that mean when you leave, Rachel doesn't do any calls at all?
That's up to Rachel.
Okay.
Having a third set of hands on a really rotten call is always a really nice thing. Having been on ambulance crews with 2 people, I understand why past leadership wanted to have 3 people. There's a big debate within the service around the whole state, whole country for that matter, about whether or not you need 2 or 3. There's not, I think, a single person out there that'll tell you, hey, sign me up for 2. That's a really great idea, particularly on rotten calls. There's calls that we go on that you need 6 and 7 people on the call because you're tracking time and tracking meds and performing a number of very unique functions. Those are generally P&B calls where you're actively doing CPR.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
I do. This is not a Village of Waterford only problem. Let's make sure we're well aware of that. Our neighbors have similar, if not worse, problems, and I have no problem saying that on camera. They're well aware of that. There are many conversations that happen behind the scenes that happen between the leaders in these communities on trying to solve this issue and work together. A lot of the volunteer firefighters you were referring to, also, it's a small world. They have been to Michigan, they've been to Rochester, they've been here, they bounce around. It's a real eye-opening problem for all of us, and hopefully myself and the new town chair and Mr. Ehlers in Rochester can actually lead and get in here and make the decisions. We will take the input of everybody that is involved, but it's going to be a very harsh comment I'm going to make. The previous leadership in all these communities did not have the balls to actually try to get something done. So that's hard to hear. It's time to try to get that done. Those conversations are ongoing. Doesn't solve the issue right now. We have a very big problem, and we need to work it through this process as well. As you did see, the last time this committee met was in the calendar year 2024. That's another problem that needs to be addressed. The more all of us are involved in these decisions, the better the outcome for our community. I can't be the sole one to make the decisions. Zeke can't, the next administrator can't. We need input from all of you, input from everybody that's involved in all levels of our village.
To Adam's point, there were times this topic was brought up to leadership, and this was before Adam, right? And the thought process, I think, was something like, we're not going to address that, or we're not going to be able to effectively address that. So this sits with the village board in conversations with the village board. So it wasn't that staff didn't bring it up, it's just that it didn't go anywhere.
I think it was brought up at the first village meeting I ever attended, which was probably 2 years ago.
I gave several briefings on this topic over the last several years that, hey, this is the staffing issue, this is where you're at. And so as I thought about what things do I need to put a bow on, or at least attempt to put a bow on before I go out the door, this is at the top of that list. It is not fair to anyone you have working in your EMS system today to expect line level $29 an hour employees to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. That falls on you guys, right? That's what you're elected and appointed to do. It's what Adam's elected to do. Dalton Brandt is doing his best to make it work over there right now. Dalton didn't ask to become the EMS director. He just got thrown in the role because he's the most senior one you have. I think that performance evaluation with Dalton is something that's going to need to come up. I've evaluated all the other department heads. I haven't evaluated Dalton because he's been in the role for about a month. I can't give him an annual performance review, so he's been in the role for a month.
Can I ask, we got a couple of village board members, why you didn't want to address it? Just your opinions.
It's not about why, it's about how.
For 2 years?
Well, it's
more.
not just
Are you
us.
asking right now, or what Zeke was
Yeah.
referring to?
Wh-
Like
why-
before I was here, do you want me
You
to
were a
address
trustee, you weren't a president, right?
Sure.
So why,
So I could only ask so many questions. I could only get so far with answers from the previous president. Okay, Zeke was always very transparent in what that president wanted direction-wise. Again, there's 7 of us, so certain things had to be brought up by certain people. I sat in this very room with, well, I guess now 3 fire chiefs in my short time here. And there were some very, very tense conversations with the past president. And those are some questions. I know he's not the president anymore, but he had that power at that time to do some of the things, or bring some of the things to us to try to do. We did a lot of trial and error. We do need to bring that forward, that we did try things. Interfacilities, it worked back in the day. It doesn't work really in this situation.
Kathy, I'm going to give you one other thing. That's that state statute provides that you all play very specific roles, and you had I think you'd have a court counsel and a previous village president that would tell you you had an abject breakdown within your police and fire commission members. You had a chairperson on that commission that was oppositional prior to any evidence being presented, to even hearing any evidence around dysfunction within what was then a combined department for fire and EMS. And so the unfortunate part is many of the decisions or actions that would have been taken to correct it, the board was prohibited from taking those steps. So your PFC has one function under state statute, and that's to be an impartial arbiter of hiring, firing, promotion, demotion. They're not supposed to fundraise for the fire department. They're not supposed to be concerned about the goodwill of the fire department. They're not supposed to learn about the operational budgets of the fire department and what goes into it and be advocates for more funding for the fire department. And if you listen to individual members of your PFC, they believe that that's what their role is. That's called alternate powers. It's adopted under state statute, has to be done at referendum. So I don't think it's fully fair to look at the trustees and say, hey, this totally sits on you guys. I think there's one, maybe two individuals on the PFC, but a lot of this sits with them. And they somehow managed to skate out of the conversation without any responsibility over it. You can figure out who those two are. But the fail-safe that was supposed to keep us from this conversation broke down. And it's unfortunate. So, okay, well now what do? Well, we reinstitute rules and regulations at the PFC. We had a resignation on the PFC over, I think, things around this. And ultimately, you still got to take corrective action. The board decided to throw money at it for a short time. Each year, I have to answer, and your next administration will have to answer to Standard & Poor's rating agency about credit rating. And 2 years ago, when they asked questions about this, my answer was, we're working on a plan. And then a year ago, when I had to answer the question around this, my answer was, we've got a plan and we're putting it into place. Okay.
Plan.
That's y'all's job, right? So the plan was we're going to go after in the facilities. It wasn't planned. We put it together at the village board level and we gave it a shot for a whole year. We reached out via telephone to the point that the ERs and the administration and Pro Health and Aurora said, please stop calling us, right? Please stop calling
I'll
us.
add to that. That was a plan that was incorporated with the staff over at the firehouse. They got behind that. They backed it. Whether they believed it or not, they backed it to our faces.
Yep.
And then it went to the board. And we all bought in on it together. I want to go back and I want to say one other thing quick. I have the utmost respect for former President Houston. I am not trying to throw him under the bus, but there's two different types of leadership here also. There's leaders that are willing to actually make the hard decision. Former President Houston had that in front of him and he chose not to do that. That's just the facts.
Which piece?
Discipline?
No, that's the part I was talking about with the PFC. I don't think a bit that it wasn't done that want to move forward. I think there was a
I
big
disagree with
obstacle
that.
over
I will
there.
disagree with that publicly, and I'll disagree with that. That we had
That's okay.
a president at the time that wanted to let things kind of just try to play themselves out, and they did not do that. They only got worse. I am not interested here, and
Yeah, maybe for a few months of that.
okay,
I'll agree with
well,
that.
those were very miserable months
They were.
in this building, and that's what I remember. And we don't need or want to go back to that. So for me, I am not interested in a statue in the park. I'm not interested in my name on a road sign here. I'm interested in doing what is best for this community, and we've kicked the can. We all are responsible that have been on the board. We need to find a solution. The best process is to involve all of you and start at this level. This has been ignored for 13 months, so here we are to start that process. Whatever we come out of here with may also be a dud and not work as well. We don't know that. But what I'm getting at is if that means whatever we choose continues to not work and I don't get reelected if I choose to continue to run, so be it. Let the next person, let the next administrator. Zeke has worked his ass off, for better or for worse, in the public's opinion, to give us a solution, many solutions. None of them have worked. So we need to involve more minds and we need to try to find a different path forward. There is another option that we talk. No one wants to talk about.
I'm getting ready to.
And I've been the only one. And former President Houston heard it from me many times. Tammy's heard it from me. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So in the midst of all of the headache around previous leadership within the department, we discussed contracting out emergency medical services, also possibly contracting out that portion of in-house fire staffing because it's an option. And I was requested at one time by the board to go out and get bids or a proposal from competent parties, which I did. We had conversations about it. And at the time, I think leadership felt very strongly that having, quote unquote, our own folks providing those roles was the right thing to do. I think the challenging part, and I'd give this to you straight up, is it is a lonely, many times thankless job to lead inside of that building. Deal with the things those folks deal with day in, day out. So what's in some respect absent is day in, day out executive level HR and leadership over that department. And that's what a contractor brings to the table, is you sign a contract with them, they provide the staffing, they provide that expert level management leadership, but it's no longer yours, so to speak. It's contract providers. You have some hiccups around that also, in that you have a union health insurance contract that has a non-adverse selection clause in it. And since those were funded positions, there would be some financial issue with moving them to contracted positions. So even that, which may solve one problem, it creates another problem somewhere else. So I also looked at changing our health insurance to somebody else, and that's an expensive proposition too. So you're somewhat damned if you do and damned if you don't. You've got a really sweet gig via the Teamsters Union for the health insurance you're providing for your employees, roughly $19,000 a year in premium. Buys health insurance for them and as many dependents as they want on a pre-Affordable Care Act, what would be thought of as a Cadillac policy. There's not a duplicate to the policy that you can enroll your employees in, and two, when you try to get something even ballpark in the same benefit level, your premiums are $250,000, $300,000 more a year than what you're spending now.
So we either spend it on health insurance or we spend it on paramedics.
Spend it somewhere. Yeah, that's
You gotta find the money, right?
Well, yeah, and former, our late Jonathan Delagrave, he and I were working on other options for this as well. So it's not that we haven't, it's just life has happened, and it's really hard to navigate when there's been so many changes.
And I didn't mean to push you guys as trustees under the bus. It was just, you said, leadership didn't want to do it, your leadership.
Well, it's not just leadership. I mean, I sat down and had meetings with many of the fire personnel and the chiefs and said, you know what, we have tried as leaders for the communities to work together. How many meetings did we have with the town and the village of Rochester saying we need to be looking at some kind of a district? But there's too many chiefs in the kitchen, so to speak. And I said, you know what, maybe it's time for you chiefs to get together and figure this out. Because, what are we supposed to do if nobody wants to work together?
So that is what Jonathan was working on. Jonathan was having meetings with the chiefs and then the chief elected officials in each community. That reached what I'll describe as a termination point. The county did put together a plan, and there just was no political will uniformly across the western part of the county to get anything done there. You had a range of thoughts and opinions from communities that thought, no, we're really in good shape, we don't need anything at all, to other communities that said we're really willing to step in and work on. I've got a letter somewhere in our files, I think from 2011, that is from Michigan and Rochester to the Village of Waterford Fire Department, where back, 15 years ago, those communities were telling the village, hey, you really need to step up and manage your stuff, because we're tired of cleaning up your mess, is kind of what it amounts to. I'm oversimplifying that letter, and I know putting words in its stead, but that's the gist of it. So I've been told repeatedly the problem has moved around, and there's times that Rochester has been down, or Michigan has been down, or Norway's been down, or Burlington's been down, and the other departments, to some degree, have kind of rallied to help take care of that, because I think everybody inherently knows that it moves around. It is a grueling process to go through firefighter 1 to become minimally qualified. John and I did that this summer. We both sat on the ground on the last day of training and looked at each other like, what are we doing here? Sucking down oxygen bottles. That's why you've lost a lot of the volunteerism around it. Like, it's work and it's hard and it's physically taxing and it's dangerous, and you just don't have people with the ability financially in the generation that you need to do this, to have the time or capacity to be able to do it. Adam, this is about the 5th time today we've had this conversation.
I think it's very fair to say that currently society is mentally, physically, financially stretched and drained. And it's all ages. It's not just the youth, it's not just the elderly, it's not just in between. Everybody's lives have been affected in some way or another. And we run into this other issue here with what you're talking about, the generation that we expect to be in some of those roles. Many of them can't afford to even live here. So we have a whole conversation about affordable housing, multifamily housing, providing apartments for people. We use the word apartments in this community, and the people and the residents are out with pitchforks. But they want somebody to be at their door within a minute and 10 seconds if they're having a medical emergency or a fire.
Can we do some just simple math for a second on that? Can everybody pull out their phone calculator? I want to have a real conversation about that because it illustrates the point. So we're going to take a entry-level EMT firefighter, and we're going to multiply their wage rate, which is 22, times their expected number of full-time hours a year, which is 2756. That should give you 60,632. We're then going to multiply that by an effective tax rate of 22%, which means we're going to do times 0.78. That's $47,292 is their after-tax income, and then we're going to multiply that by 0.25. It's $11,823. Divide that number by 12, and the amount of rent that employee can afford to pay in a month is $985. The cheapest apartment you've got in Waterford is $1,600 a month. You have a massive disconnect between what you're paying your employees and what they can afford to live at within this community, and that's why you have part of the problem you have here, is that when you ask the residents what kind of service they want, their first answer is something like free, right? And well, that's no longer tenable.
Zeke, how many volunteer firefighters do you have now?
I don't know off the top of my head on the
I think-
roster.
I think last time you thought it was like 35.
Yeah, it goes up and down.
You just mentioned that you lost some, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I think a better question would be how many are actually turning out to
Oh,
fire scenes,
absolutely. I
right?
think those are numbers that we've
So,
never seen.
If you look at our payroll records, I think the chief had been on something like 8 calls in the last year when I looked. So that's total fire calls on scene. That's a challenge. It's a different conversation, different challenge from what you're looking at today. But you have top to bottom challenges over all of it.
So it almost sounds like we need a subcommittee to look at this, because you need to talk with all different departments within the personnel or however you want to set it up. I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, expert people in the
So-
field too.
Yeah, to
We,
get
we tried. Adam has been trying.
sure.
Well, that is an issue, I think, not just in this community but everywhere. I that was one of the things I spent, I can't even tell you how many hours on last year, trying to engage with the community in so many different ways on who would serve on any type of committees or any type of subcommittees. It's just not there.
I think this one you'd get people.
I
if
think
formed it.
I think you
This
would on
one,
this one. I think
yeah.
you would on this
I've
one.
tried for a couple years to get people, nurses and doctors and,
There we go.
you know,
Sign me up.
retired fire people.
Yeah.
They'll give me their information, but then when we actually send them the questionnaire to fill out so we can form a committee, they're not getting back to
I
us.
think if you talked about this is about restructuring the department, I think you'll get. I think if you're more specific, I don't know. I'll help.
Okay.
So the first thing that has to be able to happen is the duly elected representatives and appointed representatives have to be able to have a conversation in a public setting about the issues they have. First step in solving any problems, admitting you have one. And we've had a hard time being able to do that. Today really represents like, hey guys, you got a problem. How do you want to address it? I've given presentations to the board before overall about the financial impact of this. There's a human impact over there within the building. But how do you convince somebody to come work for your organization if what you're telling them is you've got the stability of Charles Manson?
No, I think that you just hit on a good point, Z, because this was the first time that you admitted that the problem is as big as it is, and that a committee being formed could actually make more headway and change. And I think that's when you'll get people to volunteer for something,
So I think
if they know that they'll be listened to and heard, and something will change.
looking directly into your camera lens over there, President Adam Jaski and I have looked around, turned over, I don't know how many rocks, met with I don't know how many people, and Tammy Polnow I know has done the same to find people that would come out and serve. So just humbly on behalf of the village, we're looking for people that are experts in the field and will serve. Understanding the needs of the community and not advocating for more or less. That's been part of the challenge also.
Well, the challenge is too, they need to be village residents.
Sure.
to serve on our committee.
Yeah.
Sure. But I
However,
think,
I have, thinking outside the box, I said, you know what, in the past, when Rick was here, Mueller, we worked with McWanago and Vernon. Why not reach out to our neighbors again?
Mhm.
Or, can we, because that's crossing county lines then? There's other legalities that we have to look into, but I'm trying to think outside the box. I mean, my cousin started at Butler. They closed today,
I think before it was just more like people would offer suggestions. Maybe it was just online, not in a committee. But I think that they were hitting a rock and a hard place with being heard. And now that I think the problem's being openly admitted more, that I think that you'll find more people.
I hope you and whoever's watching and in this room, hopefully I portrayed over the last year that I'm willing to listen. Okay? So whoever would be interested, if you have individuals or yourself, I think it's a grand opportunity to discuss Kathy's suggestion of a subcommittee. I agree. So, and you're probably onto something if it feels out to the public that we are admitting the problem is bigger or we have a problem.
Yeah, you never really did that in so many words, I don't think.
Fair.
So I think while that is worked on, maybe that materializes, maybe it doesn't. Right now, you all are the body charged with dealing with it as it sits today. Do I think you're gonna have it solved in a month? No. Do I think you're gonna have it solved in 3 months? No. But I think you're gonna have to start working on it. So things I would like for you to think about between now and next meeting. Number one, how are you going to handle callbacks within the department? And not just leave it up to Dalton to figure out, right? So that when something does come up, there's a policy that's been adopted by the governing body politic that Dalton can point at and say, right here, this is how we're handling it. It's not something Dalton made up, it's not something Zeke made up. In part because I've learned something else. There's just two things firefighters hate, EMTs hate, paramedics hate. They hate change, and they hate everything staying the same. Okay, so it's a joke that was passed to me by one of the instructors in the program. So it's not on your department heads or your administrator to develop every single policy that comes up. And each time I've attempted to implement a policy to solve the problem, it's met with a challenge from both internal and external stakeholders. And so the finger's pointed at Zeke. To some degree, that's okay. Don't sit your next administrator up for failure, right? This sits on you guys to develop that policy. So how do you want to handle you not having a paramedic for callbacks?
My suggestion for 26 is that we meet with each department head. We have more meetings, at least monthly, for a little bit, and then maybe to quarterly. But I think we need to meet with each department head and ask, what policies need to be reviewed. We do have an update on the policy handbook that was done in 21. But going into the next portion of this, I noticed that we might not have some things that are addressed in our policy handbook. So I think it would be good for the personnel committee to meet with each department head and ask where they feel that we could make changes to make it easier and more black and white.
I would back that strongly. I know you all have lives, but maybe you should just wipe your calendar clear for 2026. It was very glaring in our fall process of our review of Administrator Jackson. We have a lot of deficiencies in our personnel and policy in a variety of ways. And we don't need to dive into those details. That's because we're focusing on what our agenda is tonight. That's for another day. But
So what's more important? Is this fire
EMS,
situation the
in
most
Zeke's opinion,
important?
yeah, I mean,
EMS
I
is the most
think
important
we
one.
should start on that and get a grip on that.
Yeah, talking about just a couple of the others. DPW, you're going to hear from a little bit. You have a changing legal environment under Act 10 that has made its way on invalidation by a circuit court. It now goes to appellate court. It's going to appellate court in a district that it probably gets, the lower court decision probably gets upheld in appellate court. And then it likely goes on to the state Supreme Court, in which case, all likelihood, probably becomes invalidated, which means that in the now, when a union comes forward to bargain with you, you can look at the union and say, hey, that's really great. State statute says you only get to bargain for the WERC upper limit for wages. That's it. That's all they can bargain for. Can't bargain over job duties, can't bargain over positions, can't bargain over equipment. They used to be able to bargain over all of that. I expect by the time you get to the end of 2026, every single union you have can bargain over all of that. And I also expect that the levy limit cap established by Act 10 also goes away, which means that tax rates around the state will at least have an opportunity to lift and balance with the inflation that we've experienced. So all of this becomes more complex and more cumbersome for you all as a committee to deal with. Within your fire department, to the point about policies not being addressed, in order to deal with, hold on, the word just escaped me, fire rating. ISO, thank you. You have an ISO rating as a community, which is effectively like a credit score for how fire ready you are. And the way that it works is anything that is 10.98765 in terms of a homeowner, there's anything lower than a 54321 for a homeowner, there's no difference. For a commercial property owner, institutional property owner, assisted living owner, whatever that would be, there is a 8 to 12% difference in property insurance rates for every one of those levels that they change. As a homeowner and any other property owner, for everything over a 5 that you go up, which is worse, there is an 8 to 12% change. You all have been able to hold on to an ISO 3. Part of why you've been able to hold on to an ISO 3, looking at that challenge, we put into place a policy. Policy was if you were fire qualified and you are admitted via the PFC to the fire department, we are going to put you on public safety pension. Why? Because if that employee goes out and gets splattered on the scene and you don't have them on public safety pension, you're not taking care of their family. And as I had conversations with them, the ones that stepped up said, we're willing to step up for that, but if you remove the public safety pension, we're out, because it is not worth it for us to be here to put our lives at risk for virtually no additional pay on a volunteer basis for this community. So you have right now on scene 2, 3, and during the day shift, 4, 5, 6 firefighters that when ISO comes around, you get the slot 6 Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday you drop to 2, and on your PMs you drop to 2. That's what you've got. That probably still buys you an ISO 3, provided training is kept up with and equipment is kept up with. By the way, your frontline engine is going to age out next year, and if you don't replace it, you're going to take some point dings there. And depending upon what goes on with your neighboring communities and their ability to respond, you may take some point dings there. If your DPW employees, the 4 of them that are on a public safety pension, come off that public safety pension because you want to reallocate those monies somewhere, they'll make individual decisions about whether or not they want to continue to provide that service. That's a policy thing that you guys need to look at. Do you want to do that, memorialize it here within the book? Do you not want to do that? I look at it like a point of consistency. You treat everybody the same. So there's a whole myriad of things you all are going to have to talk about and work through and cost analyze. Okay, moving on.